I never expected it to happen. No one ever does, right? I had been living my life, just trying to survive the daily grind, and suddenly, in one moment, everything I thought I knew about my world was completely shattered. It wasn't the kind of thing that hits you like a wrecking ball. No loud crash. No epic breakdown. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you question the noise you used to hear and wonder where it went. The kind of silence that wraps itself around you slowly, until you can't breathe without feeling its weight. It started on a Tuesday, just an ordinary Tuesday. Or so I thought. My name is Oliver Hale. I live in a small apartment on the edge of town, nothing extravagant. A few plants in the window, a couch I've had for years, a desk piled with half-read books and uncompleted projects. A regular life. I share the place with my wife, Jenny, a woman I thought I knew better than anyone else. But that was the illusion, wasn't it? That evening, I came home later than usual. I'd stayed late at work, dealing with another pointless meeting that drained the life out of me. When I opened the front door, expecting the usual hum of the refrigerator and the soft buzz of the lights overhead, I was met with nothing. It was odd, but nothing to make me panic right away. I set my keys down, called out for Jenny, but no reply. The apartment felt off. I stepped further inside, looking around. The lights were dim, and the air smelled stale, as though it hadn't been disturbed for hours. Jenny, I called again, but the words seemed to disappear into the silence, swallowed by the empty space. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. And as I moved through the rooms, living room, kitchen, even the bathroom, there was no sign of her. Nothing had been touched. The dishes were still on the counter, the couch cushions in perfect alignment. But no Jenny, not a single trace of her presence. I began to feel a creeping unease, like the kind you get when something's been wrong for a long time, and now you're just realizing it. I checked the closet, the bedroom, even the balcony. I felt like I was chasing shadows, but no matter where I looked, no matter how many rooms I searched, I couldn't find her. I tried calling her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted her, "Where are you?" No reply. Panic started to bubble under the surface, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The door to the spare room was closed. I don't know why I didn't think to open it sooner. Maybe it was the smallest room in the place, barely used. But when I turned the handle and pushed it open, I felt the air grow colder. The room was empty, save for one thing. A box, sitting squarely in the middle of the floor, unopened. I approached it cautiously, wondering if it was some sort of message. I bent down and noticed it was sealed with tape, but it wasn't marked with any name, not even Jenny's. Just an old, faded label with some numbers and an address I didn't recognize. My mind raced, the confusion growing with each passing second. Why was this box here? What was in it? Was this some sort of clue? I knelt down and opened it. Inside, there was only one thing. A photograph. It was of me. Well, sort of. It was an old photo, taken years ago, before Jenny and I even met. But there was something unsettling about it. The way I was standing, the way my expression seemed different. Almost darker. I couldn't make sense of it. My mind tried to piece it together, but it only created more questions. I turned the photo over, hoping for something, anything that might explain what this meant. There, scrawled on the back in a hasty, almost frantic handwriting, were 3 words. I never left. The words sent a chill down my spine. Who had written this? And why did it feel like it was meant for me? I took a deep breath, my thoughts racing. Something was terribly wrong. I could feel it in my bones. Jenny had been gone, and now this cryptic message, this photo, was all I had to go on. But the scariest part was that I didn't even know if I could trust what I thought I knew about Jenny anymore. Something had shifted. There was a door I hadn't noticed before, one that I was now standing at the threshold of. And the longer I stood there, the more I realized that whatever was behind it, I wasn't ready for. Not in the slightest. I couldn't bring myself to put the photo down. My hands trembled as I stared at it, trying to make sense of the image in front of me. There was something haunting about it. It was a picture from my past, but not one I recognized. I had never seen it before, at least not with this context. It was an old photo, black and white, faded at the edges. I looked younger, a little scruffier, standing outside a small house that didn't look familiar at all. It wasn't a place I had ever lived. I studied my face in the picture. My expression was distant, cold even, nothing like how I felt back then. I could almost swear it wasn't me in the photo, but there I was. My eyes, however, looked off. like I was hiding something. And then, scrawled on the back, those 3 words, "I never left." I sat back against the wall, the photo still in my hands, trying to steady my thoughts. Who could have left it? Who would even know about that time in my life? I hadn't talked about that house in years. It was a place I left behind long ago, a place that no one really knew about. I was about to get up when my phone buzzed on the table. My heart skipped. I picked it up with shaky fingers, praying it was a message from Jenny, but it wasn't. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered. "Hello?" My voice came out tight, unsure. A cold, clipped voice responded. "She left. It's over." The line went dead before I could even respond. My mind spun in circles. Who was that? What did they mean? Who knew that Jenny and I had been struggling? I stared at the phone in disbelief. I wanted to call back, but I knew I couldn't. The words echoed in my mind. It's over. Was this some sort of sick joke? Had Jenny told someone? Did she leave with someone else? I was starting to feel like I was losing control of everything. The house felt suffocating now, the silence growing louder with each passing second. I walked around the apartment, trying to find anything that would explain where she had gone, why she had disappeared, and who might be behind all this. But it felt like everything I touched only made the mystery deeper. I returned to the spare room. The box, the photograph, it was all I had. My fingers moved to open the box once more, as though hoping for some sort of hidden clue that would explain it all. But there was nothing more inside. The box was empty, except for one detail. A small scrap of paper had been wedged in the bottom, almost invisible. I pulled it out carefully, my pulse quickening. There were only 2 words written on it. "He's waiting." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read it. Who was waiting? Who was this person? The more I thought about it, the less I understood. Jenny had been acting strange in the days before she disappeared. Yes, but this? This was beyond anything I could have ever imagined. I turned the paper over, thinking there might be more, but the back was blank. No hints, no explanations. Just those 2 cryptic words. It didn't make sense. Why had Jenny left? Where had she gone? And why had she left this trail of strange, unsettling messages behind? I decided to go to the one place I hadn't thought to check. Our bedroom. Maybe there was something there, something I missed. I stepped inside, my feet dragging across the floor. The room looked exactly as it had before. The bed was made. Her side was still neatly arranged. Nothing appeared out of the ordinary. But then I saw it. On her nightstand, buried underneath a pile of papers, was something shiny. I pulled it out, an old key. It wasn't like any key I had ever seen. It was rusty, old-fashioned, almost antique. It didn't belong to any door in our apartment. That much was clear. I held it in my hand, staring at it as though it might hold the key to everything. But to what? A secret door? A hidden room? I didn't know. All I knew was that Jenny had left something behind, something that was meant for me to find. But it wasn't just the key that unsettled me. No, it was the fact that there was no explanation. No note from Jenny. No goodbye. Just these fragments, these cryptic clues leading me to a place I couldn't see. And with each passing moment, I felt more certain that whatever was happening, whatever this was, wasn't something I could figure out alone. I could feel myself spiraling. The messages, the strange photo, the cryptic note. Nothing made sense, and everything felt like a trap. But there was one thing I knew for sure. If I was ever going to understand what had happened to Jenny, I was going to have to follow this trail, no matter where it led. And as I turned the key over in my hand, I couldn't help but wonder, was I unlocking the door to her disappearance, or was I about to open a door to something far worse? I spent the next few hours pacing around the apartment, the key heavy in my pocket, gnawing at my every thought. I tried to convince myself that it was just some bizarre coincidence. Maybe Jenny had lost the key, maybe it was part of something old she kept hidden. But deep down, I knew better. It wasn't the key itself that bothered me, it was the absence of her. The way she'd just vanished without a trace, without a single word. I couldn't sit still any longer. The more I tried to rationalize, the more my mind kept returning to the one thing I had yet to check. The old house. The house from the photograph. It seemed like an absurd idea. How could I possibly think of going there? But something inside me was pulling me, urging me to understand. Maybe there was something I missed back then, something I didn't want to see, or maybe something I had buried deep in my mind. I grabbed my jacket and left, the key still in my hand, my heart thudding in my chest with every step. The house was only about 20 minutes away, but it felt like an eternity as I drove, my mind spinning with endless questions. Why was I even going back there? What could I possibly find that would make sense of any of this? The place looked just as I remembered. The same cracked windows, the old wooden fence, the overgrown ivy creeping up the side of the building. It had been years since I'd seen it, but the sight still hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't thought about that house in ages, and suddenly, here I was, standing in front of it again. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. A hidden door? A long-forgotten note? Or maybe just the ghosts of my past, those lingering memories of a time I had tried to erase. But as I stepped closer to the house, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half hoping it was Jenny, but instead, it was another message from an unknown number. The words sent a chill down my spine. "You shouldn't have come." I stood there, frozen in place, my pulse racing. The message felt like a warning, but a warning about what? I could feel the weight of the key in my pocket again, the metallic chill making my hand shake as I grasped it tightly. Should I turn back? Leave this place and never look back? But I couldn't. Not now. Not when I was so close. I reached for the front door, the old brass handle creaking under my grip as I turned it. The door opened with a groan, as though it had been untouched for years. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. The floor creaked beneath me, the smell of mildew thick in the air. I moved carefully, my senses alert to every sound, every creak of the old house. It was unsettling, the kind of silence that makes you question whether you're alone at all. I headed for the staircase, the same staircase I had once climbed as a young man, full of dreams and ambitions. Now, it felt like a descent into a dark, unknown place. The upstairs was just as I remembered, and yet, nothing felt familiar. The walls were bare, the old furniture gone, replaced by a cold, oppressive emptiness. I moved through the rooms, searching for anything that might explain why I was here, why I was being led back to this place. But there was nothing, no clue, no sign that Jenny had ever been here, or that she had ever left me anything. But then I saw it. The door, the one I had never noticed before. It was tucked away in the farthest corner of the house, hidden behind a drape of cobwebs. It was small, inconspicuous, and yet, there was something about it that felt wrong. Something about the way it was placed in the room, like it had always been there, but had never been meant to be found. I couldn't breathe as I moved toward it, my heart thumping in my chest. The key was still in my pocket, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I pulled it out, and with trembling hands, I inserted it into the lock. The click of the mechanism was deafening in the silence. I pushed the door open slowly, dreading what I might find. But what I saw was nothing like I expected. It wasn't another room. It wasn't a hidden treasure chest. It was a hallway, a narrow, dark corridor that seemed to stretch on forever, the air thick with the scent of decay. The walls were lined with old photographs, but they were not of me or Jenny. They were of strangers, people I didn't recognize, people who looked familiar. There were faces in these pictures, distorted faces, but their eyes, they stared back at me like they knew me, like they were waiting for me to figure it out. I stepped forward, the floorboards creaking beneath me, my breath catching in my throat. The corridor seemed endless, but my legs moved on their own, pulling me deeper into the unknown. The further I walked, the more I felt a presence, a feeling that I wasn't alone. And then, at the end of the hall, there was a door. A plain, wooden door, just like the one I had opened to get in here. But this one was different. It was locked, and in the dim light, I could see something painted on it, something I couldn't make out at first. I moved closer, my heart racing with anticipation, and as I reached out to touch the door, I realized what was painted on it. The words were scrawled in red, smeared like someone had rushed to write them. "You shouldn't have come here, Oliver." I froze. The name. My name. But how? How could they know? I backed away from the door, my head spinning, the walls closing in around me. Something was happening, something bigger than I could understand. And I had just opened the door to a truth I wasn't ready to face. The words on the door felt like a punch to the gut. "You shouldn't have come here, Oliver." The ink was smeared, and the letters were jagged, as though they were hastily written by someone who wanted to make sure they were seen. I stood there, frozen, staring at it. My hand still hovered near the doorknob, the cold wood beneath my fingertips feeling more like a warning than a door to something new. The air in the hallway seemed to press in around me, thick with the weight of the unknown, and for a moment, I considered turning back. I should have. I should have left the house and never come near it again. But something in me, something I didn't even know was there, kept me rooted to the spot. I had to know. I had to understand what this was, why I was here, and why Jenny had left. Why her presence was everywhere I turned, but she was nowhere to be found. With shaking hands, I slowly twisted the door handle. The door creaked open, louder than I expected. The sound felt like it was calling me into whatever lay beyond. I stepped into the room, and as soon as I did, the temperature dropped. The room was dark, almost pitch black, except for a faint glimmer coming from the far corner. I hesitated, my heart racing, but the curiosity pushed me forward. The air smelled damp, heavy with dust and age. The floor was uneven beneath my feet, and the walls were lined with old, cracked mirrors that distorted the reflection of the faint light. As I moved further into the room, the glimmer I had seen before took shape. It was an old, tarnished lamp, sitting on a small wooden table in the corner. The light it emitted was weak, barely enough to illuminate anything. I stepped closer, my mind racing. That's when I saw it. On the table, right beneath the lamp, was a small, leather-bound notebook. It looked old, decades old, maybe. The pages inside were yellowed with age, and the binding was cracked. But there was something about it that caught my eye, something that told me I needed to open it. I reached for the notebook, my fingers trembling as I lifted it up. The moment I touched it, a cold gust of wind blew through the room, rattling the mirrors on the walls. I spun around, my heart pounding. But there was nothing. Just the emptiness of the room and the strange, unsettling feeling that something was watching me. I opened the notebook carefully, flipping through the brittle pages. The handwriting inside was strange, tight, almost frantic, but it was definitely Jenny's handwriting. The ink was uneven, as though she had been writing in a hurry or perhaps under duress. The first entry I read was dated from a few weeks ago. I've been hearing things. In the walls. At night. It's like whispers, but they're not coming from anywhere I can see. I don't know if I'm losing my mind or if something is really here. I feel like I'm being followed. Everywhere I go. My stomach churned as I read the words. What was she talking about? Whispers in the walls. Had she been hearing something I couldn't hear? Had she been afraid of something? Or someone? I flipped to the next page. He's been watching me. I can feel his eyes on me, even when I'm alone. I've tried to ignore it, but it's getting worse. Every night, the shadows move. I don't know if I can do this anymore. My chest tightened. Who was she talking about? He. Who had been watching her? I could feel the walls of the room closing in, the mirrors reflecting back at me like silent witnesses to whatever this was. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I turned the page again. The door is real. I've seen it. It's in the house. I don't know what it is, but I feel like if I go through it, everything will change. I'm not sure I'm ready for that. But I have to. I don't have a choice. The words seemed to blur as I read them, my mind racing. The door. The door I had just opened. Was it the same one she had been writing about? The feeling in the pit of my stomach twisted into something darker, something that felt like a warning. Jenny had known about this door, about this house. She had been here. She had been in this room. And now, it was as though everything I had thought I knew about her, about our life together, was coming undone. The notebook shook in my hands as I turned to the last page. The final entry was recent, just a day or two ago. I don't know how much longer I have. The door is calling me, but I can't go. I can't leave. I don't know if I can trust myself anymore. And then, at the bottom of the page, there was something different. Something that made my blood run cold. You'll find me soon enough. But when you do, it won't be me you're looking at. I felt my heart drop. What did that mean? What was she trying to say? Was she still in danger? Had something happened to her that I couldn't see? I slammed the notebook shut, the sound echoing off the walls. My mind was spinning, and I couldn't breathe. I needed answers, but the deeper I dug, the further I seemed to fall into this twisted nightmare. Jenny had been here. She had written this. And now, I was standing in the same room, with the same door, feeling like I was being pulled into something that I couldn't escape from. I stood up, looking around the room again, my eyes darting from the mirrors to the walls, to the door I had come through. The chill in the air was unbearable now, the silence deafening. I wanted to leave, to get out of this house and forget any of this had ever happened. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't stop. I couldn't walk away. Whatever was happening here, whatever this was something I couldn't escape. Not anymore. I turned to leave, but just as I reached the door, I heard a sound. A faint scratching, like nails against wood. I froze. It was coming from behind me. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to know. But I had no choice. Slowly, I looked back at the mirrors. And then, I saw it. A shadow moving behind me. A figure, dark and indistinct, standing just out of reach of the light. And it was staring right at me. The shadow was unmistakable. It was tall, thin, its outline barely visible against the dim light, yet it felt wrong. My heart skipped a beat as I stood frozen in the doorway, my eyes locked on the figure. I had no idea how it got there, but I could feel it. It was waiting. The longer I stood still, the more real it became. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a trick of the light, a reflection, or the corner of my mind playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew this was no trick. I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to acknowledge that there was something standing behind me, something that had no place in this world. But I couldn't turn away. It was like an invisible force was holding me there, locking me in place. Slowly, my hand reached for the doorframe, my fingers curling into it as if trying to find something stable in the madness. The shadow didn't move, didn't shift. It just stood there, watching. My breath came out in shallow gasps, my chest tight, the air around me growing colder. A sense of dread, of something primal, washed over me, making every instinct scream to flee, to leave the room, to get out of the house. But where would I go? How could I leave when I had come this far? I took a step forward. The shadow shifted, just barely, like it had noticed me moving. It wasn't a full motion, just a slight twitch. But it was enough to make my heart race again. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, caught between fear and curiosity. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the shadow moved. It was swift, almost too fast to track, its outline blending with the dim light until it was no longer there. I blinked, not sure if I had imagined it, but the room felt heavier now. The silence felt more oppressive, as if whatever had been in the room before was no longer hidden in the darkness, but now shared the space with me, fully aware of my presence. I should have left. I should have run out of that room and never looked back. But something kept me there. I felt like I was being drawn into something deeper, something I wasn't meant to see. The notebook in my hand felt like a lifeline, but the words within it, Jenny's words, were starting to make less sense, more like riddles than answers. The room, the house, the whole situation had become a labyrinth of fear and confusion. The shadows felt alive, crawling under the surface, and I began to wonder if I was the one who didn't belong there. Then, from the corner of the room, I saw something that made my blood freeze. A door I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't the one I had entered through, nor was it the one Jenny had written about in the notebook. This door was smaller, almost hidden by the walls, as though it had been deliberately obscured. But there it was, in the corner, standing out now like a dark promise. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to go toward it. I walked cautiously across the room, the floor creaking beneath my feet, my eyes darting between the door and the mirrors on the walls, half expecting to see that shadow reappear. But the room was empty again, the mirrors reflecting only my own nervous figure. The closer I got to the door, the more the air seemed to thicken, almost suffocating. My hand reached for the doorknob, but the moment my fingers brushed it, something inside me snapped. The silence was deafening, the tension unbearable, and the door, this door, felt like the key to everything. Whatever was hidden behind it, whatever had been waiting for me, it was about to be revealed. I turned the knob. The door opened slowly, creaking as if protesting my intrusion. Beyond it, there was only darkness. But I felt something pull me in, a force stronger than any rational thought, urging me to step through. For a moment, I hesitated. The room behind me, the mirrors, the mysterious shadow, everything felt like it was part of a puzzle I wasn't supposed to solve. But I had come this far, and there was no turning back now. I stepped inside. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me, leaving me in absolute darkness. I couldn't see anything, couldn't feel anything but the chill that had now overtaken my skin. I reached out, my hands searching for the walls, trying to find something, anything, that could give me a sense of direction. But my fingers met nothing but cold air. A whisper brushed past my ear, so faint I thought it was just the wind. But then it came again, louder and closer. My breath hitched. "You shouldn't have come, Oliver." I froze, the voice like ice in my veins. It was faint at first, but it felt unmistakably real. I wasn't alone. Whoever, or whatever, was in this room with me wasn't just a shadow. It was something else, something much more dangerous. I reached out again, but this time, my fingers brushed against something solid, a body. Cold, lifeless, its presence sending a surge of panic through me. My pulse raced. I pulled my hand back, but the presence didn't leave. It was still there. I wanted to scream, to run, but the silence was suffocating. My heart pounded in my ears, and my mind raced with 1,000 questions I couldn't answer. Who was with me in this dark room? Why had they left me here? And then, in the deepest, darkest corner of my mind, a single thought broke through. This isn't real. None of it is real. This isn't Jenny. This is something else. But that thought, as fleeting as it was the last thing I could hold on to before everything around me descended into madness. The whisper came again, this time closer, so close I could feel the cold breath on my neck. "You're not supposed to leave." I turned to face it, but there was nothing there. Only the darkness. I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against my chest, making it harder and harder to think clearly. My heart hammered in my ears, every beat louder than the last. I stood there, in the dark, with nothing but the echo of that voice in my mind. "You're not supposed to leave." The sensation of the cold breath on my neck lingered, but when I turned, there was nothing there. The darkness swallowed the space, wrapping itself around me in a suffocating grip. I tried to move, to take a step, but my legs felt heavy, like I was standing on quicksand, unable to escape the grip of whatever force had taken hold of this place. I reached out, my hands groping for anything solid. My fingers scraped across a cold, smooth surface that felt like metal. My skin crawled at the sensation. What was this? I felt around more, but the object was far too big to be a door. It seemed to stretch on forever in the blackness. The edges were smooth, but they didn't feel like something from this world. My pulse quickened. "Jenny," I whispered into the dark, my voice trembling, though I wasn't sure if I was asking for her or begging for a reason. But the only response was silence, followed by a whisper so faint, it might as well have been a memory. "You should have stayed away." My breath caught in my throat. The voice was no longer a whisper, but a soft murmur that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence. It felt like it was coming from all around me, as though the darkness itself was alive, breathing, speaking directly into my mind. I had to do something. I had to move, but my body wouldn't obey. The weight of fear and confusion was pressing down on me, and I felt it beginning to suffocate me. I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself, to center my thoughts. Maybe if I could just calm down, I could make sense of this. But nothing made sense. There were no answers, only more questions, each one leading to deeper confusion. I forced my eyes open, and for a moment, everything seemed to flicker, like a faulty television set. The darkness around me warped, shifted, and then snapped back into place. But something had changed. The space felt less empty. I wasn't alone anymore. The feeling of being watched had intensified. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, pressing into me from every angle. I turned in every direction, trying to see something, anything, but there was no sign of anyone. There were no shadows, no figures, just the black void stretching endlessly before me. Yet the feeling of being watched only grew stronger, like invisible hands were slowly closing in. I took a shaky step forward, my feet scraping against the cold floor. The sensation of moving through the dark was disorienting. Every step I took felt like I was wading through thick water. The room, if you could even call it a room, seemed to stretch on, pulling me further into the abyss. Then I saw it. A faint glow appeared at the far end of the space, flickering like a distant star. It was barely perceptible, but it was enough to stir something in me. A flicker of hope, maybe. I wasn't sure what it was, but it drew me in. My feet moved toward it, though I didn't know why. The glow was weak, distant, but I couldn't help but feel like it was calling me. The closer I got, the clearer it became. It was a doorway that seemed to shimmer with an unnatural light. The glow was pulsing now, as though it had a life of its own. There was something wrong about it, something that didn't feel natural, but I couldn't turn back. Not when I had come this far. I reached out for the door handle, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the cold metal. The moment my hand made contact, the door swung open with a loud creak, sending a chill through my spine. Behind it, there was a room, but it wasn't like the one I had just been in. It was bright, almost blinding, and the air smelled fresh, alive. I stepped through the threshold, almost instinctively, and the door slammed shut behind me. I stood in the new room, the sudden light almost overwhelming my senses. The walls were lined with strange symbols, unfamiliar runes carved into the stone. The floor was covered in a deep, rich carpet that seemed to absorb sound. The room was eerily quiet, too quiet, except for one sound. The faintest whisper, so soft I almost couldn't catch it. "You shouldn't have come." It was Jenny's voice. I spun around, heart racing, but there was no sign of her. Only the strange symbols, their sharp edges glimmering faintly in the light. There was something wrong about this room, about the way it felt, like it was both familiar and alien at the same time. I stepped further in, trying to make sense of it. My mind raced, trying to process everything. The photo, the notebook, the door, the shadow. Suddenly, the door behind me burst open with a violent force, slamming against the wall. I whirled around, fear flooding me. But there was nothing there. Just the dark hallway I had come from. I blinked, my mind reeling. How had the door opened by itself? How had it even closed in the first place? And then I saw it. At the far end of the room, partially obscured by the shadows, was a figure. A man, or something that looked like one. He was tall, cloaked in dark robes that seemed to shift and ripple like smoke. His face was obscured by a hood, but I could feel his gaze, cold, unblinking, piercing through me. He stepped forward, and I instinctively took a step back. But the room felt smaller now, the air heavier. There was no escape. "It's time, Oliver." The figure spoke, his voice a low rasp, like the wind scraping against dry leaves. "You've crossed the threshold. You've seen too much. You're not going anywhere." His words hit me like a punch. I didn't understand. What did he mean? Why was I here? Why had Jenny disappeared? He reached up, pulling back his hood, and for the first time, I saw his face. It was my face. I stumbled backward, my legs giving out beneath me. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the figure before me was a twisted reflection of myself. The same eyes, the same features, but distorted in a way that made my stomach churn. "You wanted answers, Oliver. Now you'll get them, but not the ones you expect." I opened my mouth to speak, to ask him what the hell was going on, but no words came out. Instead, the world around me began to fade, the edges blurring as if reality itself was tearing at the seams. And then everything went black. I awoke with a jolt, gasping for air as if I had been submerged underwater. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came out in sharp, frantic bursts. For a moment, I couldn't place where I was. My eyes scanned the dim surroundings, trying to make sense of the thick, oppressive darkness. But the air was different now, colder, heavier, and it felt wrong. The room around me was unfamiliar, but it also felt like I had been here before. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I noticed the walls. They were not solid walls, but a series of mirrors, tall, narrow, stretching upward into a seemingly endless space. I stood in the center of what looked like a hall, the reflections around me twisting and contorting, as if the very nature of reality was bending under some unseen force. Every mirror was slightly different. Some were cracked, others were completely intact, their surfaces gleaming as though they had just been polished. Each reflection was distorted, like a funhouse mirror, but it wasn't just my image that shifted, it was everything. I reached out hesitantly, my fingers grazing one of the mirrors. The cold surface sent a shiver through me, and I recoiled instinctively, unsure if I had touched something real or some twisted version of myself. I wasn't sure if it was the mirrors warping my sense of perception or if the room itself was alive, watching me, waiting for me to make my next move. The more I looked around, the more I realized that these weren't just any ordinary mirrors. No, these reflections weren't showing me. They were showing something else. Each mirror reflected a different version of reality. Some were static, others moved, like a scene playing out in a dream, shifting between past and present. In one mirror, I saw a memory of myself, the old me, before all of this had started, back when I was happy. The reflection showed me laughing, standing beside Jenny, her hand resting on my shoulder. The image was so vivid, so lifelike, it felt like I could reach out and touch it. But I knew I couldn't. I knew that version of me didn't exist anymore. I turned away quickly, my breath coming faster. The mirrors were playing tricks on me, showing me what I wanted to see, but never giving me the truth. I needed answers, but I felt like they were just out of my reach, taunting me from the other side of the glass. I took another step, and that's when I saw it. A reflection, different from all the others. This one wasn't just a distorted image of myself. It was her, Jenny, standing in front of a mirror just a few feet away, her back to me, her hair falling around her face. She didn't turn when I called her name. She didn't move at all. But the reflection was unmistakable. "Jenny?" I whispered, my voice barely audible in the heavy silence. No response. I stepped forward, drawn to her, but the moment my foot touched the floor, the reflection of her shifted. She turned her head slowly, her eyes locking onto mine through the mirror. But it wasn't her face anymore. It was a different face, twisted, contorted, like something out of a nightmare. The eyes were black, hollow, like they had been gouged out and replaced with something dark and endless. I froze, my pulse hammering in my chest. What was happening? Her lips parted, and I could hear her voice, soft at first, almost like a murmur. "You shouldn't have come, Oliver. Now you'll never leave." I staggered backward, heart racing, my hands shaking. This wasn't Jenny. This, whatever it wasn't her. The reflection of her smirked, but it was an empty, cruel expression. And then, before I could react, the mirror cracked. A sharp sound cut through the air, the glass splintering in front of me, but the reflection didn't disappear. No, it grew larger, more menacing, its form stretching out, almost as if it were reaching toward me. I stumbled back, my feet slipping against the floor, but before I could get far enough away, another mirror flickered to life. This time, the image wasn't Jenny, it was me again. But not the version of me that had stumbled through the hall. No, this was another version, one that looked calm and collected, as if everything that had happened so far was just part of a game. I couldn't breathe. The other me in the reflection looked so real, so much like the man I used to be, but there was something in his eyes. Something empty. A hollow, lifeless stare that pierced right through me. He stepped forward in the mirror, and I felt my heart lurch as if he were about to reach out from the glass and drag me in. "You've come far, Oliver," the reflection of me said, his voice low and smooth, but with an edge of something sinister. "But it's too late now. There's no way out. You've crossed the line, and now you'll pay the price." I backed away, panic rising in my chest. I turned around, desperate to find a way out, but the mirrors were closing in. Each reflection was a distorted version of reality, a cruel mockery of everything I thought I knew. The reflections of Jenny, of myself, they all seemed to smile, mockingly, as if they were in on some terrible secret. The whispers began again, low at first, but they grew louder, more insistent. "It's already too late." I turned to run, but the mirrors shifted, closing around me. There was no escape. The room, the hall, the mirrors, they were all alive, breathing, moving with a will of their own. I couldn't tell where the room ended and where the reflections began. My mind was starting to unravel, the edges of reality blurring into something dark and twisted. I stumbled, my breath ragged, as I tried to push through the distorted reflections. I was trapped. The whispers surrounded me, growing louder, and the mirrored versions of myself and Jenny seemed to mock my every move. I felt the cold air wrap around me, closing in tighter. I could hear the reflections now, the echoes of my past, my regrets, my failures, each one speaking in unison, their voices merging into a single, dissonant chorus. "You should have stayed away, Oliver. You should have never come back." The final reflection I saw wasn't of me or Jenny. No, this time it was the shadow, the figure that had haunted me from the start. It stood behind me in the mirror, its face hidden in shadow, but I could feel its presence, its darkness, creeping into the room, into my mind. It spoke, its voice low and cold. "You wanted to find her. But the truth is, Oliver, she was never yours to find." And then, the mirrors shattered, the sound of breaking glass filling the room like 1,000 screams. The world went black again. I woke up again. this time with clarity, as though the fog that had clouded my mind had finally lifted. My heart was no longer racing, and the suffocating darkness that had threatened to swallow me whole had vanished. I was no longer in the hall of mirrors, surrounded by distorted reflections of myself and Jenny. Instead, I found myself in a quiet, familiar space, my own living room. I blinked several times, taking in the surroundings, as if making sure I wasn't still caught in some twisted dream. The walls, the couch, the coffee table, they were all there. Everything was exactly as it should be. For a moment, I just sat there, breathing deeply, trying to process what had happened. It felt as though a lifetime had passed since I first walked through the door of that strange house. So much fear, so many dark revelations, but now, it all seemed like a bad memory, slipping away like smoke. The heaviness that had weighed on my chest for so long was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of calm. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling steady beneath me. For the first time in what felt like ages, I was no longer haunted by the question of where Jenny had gone. The darkness, the voices, the twisted versions of myself, they were all fading, becoming distant echoes of a past that no longer controlled me. Then I heard it, the sound of the front door opening. I turned, and there she was, Jenny. She stepped inside, smiling, her hair slightly disheveled, but her eyes as warm as ever. There was no hint of the fear or darkness that had plagued my thoughts for so long. She was simply here, alive, real. I blinked, not sure if I was imagining it. Jenny, I asked, my voice trembling, but this time with hope. She looked at me with a soft, reassuring smile. I'm sorry, she said, her voice filled with warmth. I had to step away for a while, but I never really left. I needed to find myself again, to figure things out. I stood frozen, my heart thundering in my chest. It felt like a dream, but her presence, her calm demeanor, was undeniable. You've been through so much, she continued, walking toward me, her hand reaching for mine. But everything is going to be okay now. We're going to be okay. The moment her hand touched mine, something shifted. It was like all the weight, all the fear, and the confusion of the past few days dissolved in an instant. The darkness that had once clouded everything was finally gone. The house, the mirrors, the twisted shadows. It was as though they had never existed at all. I felt a rush of relief, so intense it almost knocked the breath out of me. She was here. She was real. And we were together. I thought I'd lost you. I whispered, my voice cracking. You didn't, she said softly. I've always been here, even when you couldn't see me. Sometimes, we just have to face our fears, our doubts, and our past to find our way back to each other. We stood there for a moment, just holding each other, the quiet settling around us like a blanket. The world outside was still, peaceful. The house, our home, was full of light now, the shadows no longer holding any power over us. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to breathe freely. Whatever nightmare I had gone through, whatever twisted reality had tried to pull me under, was behind me. And now, I had Jenny back. We had each other. The past couldn't define us anymore. I'm sorry, I said again, the words finally coming out. I didn't understand what you were going through. I didn't see it. I thought I was the only one lost. She shook her head gently, smiling with understanding. We were both lost, Oliver. But we found each other again. That's what matters. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't seen before. The darkness wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something new. We had made it through the worst. We had faced our fears, uncovered the secrets that had haunted us, and now we could start fresh, together. I took her hand, and together, we walked toward the future. The light had returned, and I was ready to embrace it.